The Kamala Harris-Tim Walz interview. It's the first interview of the election. It might end up being the only interview that many voters end up watching until probably way after Labor Day. Probably, like, I mean, what? We're like 75 days away from the election. So, you know, with 75 days away from the election, this being one of the first interviews, it might also be one of the last interviews voters really get to see, since it's the first time they really get to introduce them to the public. And then you're gonna have, of course, the big election run. And if you watch the first time, are you gonna watch every single time after? No, this is the first time they got their attention. So it's a really big moment. And it's not only a big moment for Kamala Harris, it's also a big moment for Tim Walz, because they're both being interviewed at the same time. Which I saw a lot of people reacting to that pretty angrily. And if this is the only interview Kamala Harris does, I would say, okay, that's fair. If she's only doing interviews with one person, with another person backing them up. But people also need to understand that Tim Walz has not introduced himself to the country. Tim Walz was just nominated vice president not too long ago. And it's not that crazy to have the VP nominee and the presidential nominee be interviewed together. It's been done on the campaign trail before. So people are acting like it's crazy. Oh my God, she has like a care worker with her as she does her first interview. No, it's just they're doing an interview together because they both have not been introduced to the public. And it is the historical precedent that after the party nominates a VP and a presidential nominee, that they go and get interviewed. And so that's what they're doing. Now, if this is the only interview they do, then I'll eat my hat and I'll say Kamala Harris is a coward and she won't do interviews. But I doubt, you know, with 75 days until the election, this is the only interview she's going to do. And I've seen her interact with the press in other environments too. They're easing her into it. That's very clear. I'm not denying that. But that's also smart because Kamala Harris poll numbers are up. So being like, okay, let's not do anything crazy now. We've rolled the, I mean, think about how many times Democrats have rolled the dice, right? Democrats rolled the dice on having Biden drop out. Actually, no, let's go further back. They rolled the dice on having a debate. Remember, people say that debate was a disaster. Biden challenged Trump to that debate. People forget that. Biden challenged Trump to that debate. He went on Twitter, or, well, I assume not Biden went on Twitter, but one of his staffers recorded him doing a video where he's like, hey, Trump, I'm going to debate you. I'm going to debate. Agree to my debate. And then Trump agreed to the debate, you know, after a little bit of like, oh, you know, I think they kind of were caught off guard a little bit. Maybe they thought, oh my God, does Biden have something up his sleeve? So they rolled the dice there. Then they had the debate, went badly. Okay. Then Biden dropped out, which of course was a massive roll of the dice. Then Kamala Harris was nominated, which was a roll of the dice instead of having a convention, just passing it straight to her, even though it was probably the least risky roll of the dice. Then they went with Tim Walz instead of somebody in one of the swing states, which was a roll of the dice, but I think that paid off. Then the DNC went well. And then there was, of course, the moment where Trump almost died, and there was a roll of the dice if there would be a sympathy vote reaction, and then there wasn't. And so, you know, Democrats playing it safe right now with media appearances, you know, to not take the attention off of Donald Trump right now, like flipping off, posting like QAnon slogans and having his VP going after like childless cat ladies and, you know, letting them, you know, produce the disasters while just having your team go on the offensive as you try to campaign in the swing states. I don't think that's a bad strategy. I think it's a not risky strategy. They should still do interviews, but it makes sense that they're being conservative now. It makes sense. They've taken so many risks. How many more risks do they really want to take? And I'm all for the presidential nominee being interviewed as much as possible. I'm just saying from their perspective, do they really want to be like, okay, Kamala, we're going to have you do CNN, then MSNBC, then NBC, then we're going to have you go on Fox. And not only are you going to be talking to, you know, the Fox News host, but we're going to have you go after that. We're going to go to talk to this. No, they don't want to do that, especially because they only have so much time. And if they're going to do that, to make sure that there's not, you know, any problems, there's probably going to be a decent amount of prep. Considering the you know, the stakes of the election. This isn't an internet debate. This is an election for president, which could decide the fates of millions upon millions of people. So to me, it makes sense from their perspective. They should still do interviews, but they've rolling the dice so much that I kind of give them almost a pass. They should still do interviews. She should introduce herself to the public. But my God, the stakes. Dana Bush is an overpaid Karen who asked dumb questions. VP Harris and Gov Walz handled it well. See, Wanda, it's interesting because I haven't watched any of this except for like a 30-second clip about the Israel section because that got clipped a lot on Twitter. So on Twitter, though, I was seeing like right-wingers and libertarians react to this saying, oh my gosh, Kamala Harris didn't really go into any policies. It was a bad interview. It was a disaster. It was terrible. It just shows it can't be a candidate. But once I look at my chat, they're like, I don't know. It looked fine to me. I look at other people, you know, if I go into left-wing bubbles, they're like, yeah, I think it was good. I think they introduced themselves well. Went okay. So it seems like the spectrum of reaction on this is just like just a wide swaths apart. I'd be interested in seeing some of the like sample polling if they had like any, you know, people together watching it. I mean, CNN already does like little sample groups of like 6, 7, 8 people, and they ask them after the debates if they're going to interview the presidential candidate. Maybe they had that as well. Probably not, but I'd be interested because I feel like the internet has just made different bubbles, and jumping from bubble to bubble and getting different perspectives, I don't think is giving me like a deeper insight. I think it's just showing me 2 different like polls. We're going to get straight into the interview, I think. Let's watch Harris and Walz. Good luck. Let's check it out.
It's never a good time for migraine,
It isn't. It truly never is a good time for a migraine. Any last predictions, chat? Any last predictions? My prediction is going to be when the border comes up, they're going to, of course, divert, as they should, honestly, divert to the border bill that they tried to get through, that James Lankford negotiated with Democrats, and that's going to be the main point to counter it. And she's going to say if she's elected, she will pass it into law, even though she should alter it with Dreamers protections, because there's currently nothing in the bill around Dreamers, and I thought that was a huge failure for the Democrats in negotiations, honestly, considering we control the Senate and the presidency.
Madam Vice President, Governor Walz, thank you so much for sitting down with me and bringing the bus. The bus tour is well underway here in Georgia. You have less time to make your case to voters than any candidate in modern American history. The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day 1 in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward, in a way that generations of Americans have been.
It's difficult being the VP of the current incumbent and being asked that question, because if you were the opposing candidate, let's say she was running against Trump, she could say, well, first thing is I'm going to institute all these executive orders. They're going to stop them from doing, for example, the trans-military ban, or this, or this, or this, or this, or all these different things. But all the things that are probably in the realm of what she would do if probably by executive action has already been done by executive action by Biden. I'm sure people could find like a few examples, but that's in the vast majority of instances. And so, I mean, like the best thing she could do is like introduce X, Y, or Z legislation into the House, or make case for X, Y, Z plan around the middle class. But it's not as easy as somebody like Trump, who's going to say, I'm going to get rid of this executive order, we're going to get rid of this dumb environmental executive order. It's more difficult as the VP pick.
Fueled by hope and by optimism. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
So what would you do day 1?
Day 1, it's going to be about, 1, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy.
Yep, there it is. Okay, I was like, how do you do that with the middle class? Because it's not as simple as, I'm going to pass the executive order that makes the middle class wealthier again. Or I'm going to pass the executive order to just make it $15 minimum wage, because some people said you could do that. It's not that easy. Point is, it's not that, it's not that easy. So the closest you could get is I'm going to put forward this plan. And okay, so she's going to introduce a plan. Okay, smart. I didn't know how she was going to turn that around. Sorry, I'm nervous. It's the first question of the interview. I won't pause this much, I swear.
Number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one.
What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the Vice President's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We did it in Minnesota to have a federal partner in this. Unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. People, I mean, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America, and today we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries.
The standard she's using by any wealthy nation is G7 nations, because that's the comparison where that statement comes from. It's the fact that America, its GDP growth and how its economy reacted post-COVID was better than any other G7 nation, Germany, etc.
A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging, what we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years, what we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
So you have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%. The work that we have done to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Donald Trump said he was going to do a number of things, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Never happened. We did it. So now, as I travel in the state of Georgia and around our country, the number of seniors that have benefited. I was in Nevada recently, a grandmother who showed me her receipts. And before we capped the cost of insulin for seniors at $35 a month, she was paying hundreds of dollars, up to thousands of dollars a month for her insulin. She's not doing that any
You
longer.
maintain Bidenomics is a success.
I maintain that when we do the work of bringing down prescription medication for the American people, including capping the cost of the annual cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000, when we do what we did in the first year of being in office to extend the child tax credit so that we cut child poverty in America by over 50%, when we do what we have done to invest in the American people and bringing manufacturing back to the United States so that we created over 800,000 300,000 new manufacturing jobs, bringing business back to America, what we have done to improve the supply chain so we're not relying on foreign governments to supply American families with their basic needs, I'll say that that's good work. There's more to do, but that's good work.
Okay. First, JP, thank you so much for the YouTube sub. I appreciate that. The $6,000 a month for the first year of a child's life, I think that's a good policy. I always liked seeing in other countries the stuff that they did to help first-time mothers with childcare, with, you know, getting clothing and food and cribs and certain essential items. I believe even in some Nordic countries, they even give you like a small, very inexpensive crib with like almost with baby clothing and a few things as like a care package as you leave the hospital after you give birth. And I mean, that type of policy of, I think, a state taking that early investment to make sure that the future members of the state, the future people who are going to be participating in the economy, future doctors, future police officers, future lawyers, future judges, future grocers, future butchers, future farmers, that they're taking an early investment in the health of the child, the mental health of the child, the physical health of the child, which are the formative years of the child. And those early years are very important. Getting the right nutrition, making sure that they're getting enough sleep, making sure that they're eating well, making sure that they're getting proper, you know, checkups to make sure that they're healthy, and trying to jump on any health problems early. And the earlier you deal with it, not only the better for the child, but the cheaper it's going to be, not only for the family, but for the country long term. And so I think that it's smart. Now, that's just $6,000, only one policy. It's not transformative across the entire, it's not like we're also going to help with the medical care and this, but it's a step in the right direction. And $6,000 is not nothing. And I do think making the child tax cut permanent is also a good policy. She's talked about the housing plan. She talked about the $25,000 down payment. She also has talked about in more detail on other occasions that they want to build 3 million homes. I think that's actually a little conservative. I think she should go further. I'm pretty bold on this. I believe a lot of homes need to be built all across the United States on both coasts, excessively at the moment, because housing prices are high. So I think 3 million is good. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think having someone like Tim Walz as VP, who helped invest in housing infrastructure in Minnesota, in this position with her, is also good to help implement those policies. I like that they opened with they opened like this. They opened straight with policy. They got straight to policy in the first part 1 of the CNN interview. It's not starting with Donald Trump, not starting with, dumb scandals, starting with policy. I think it's good from CNN, and I think it's good for the campaign.
I want to get some clarity on where you stand on some key policy issues. Energy is a big one. When you were in Congress, you supported the Green New Deal. And in 2019, you said, quote, "There is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking." Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
In 2019, I believe, at a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very
Okay, so some people might be confused as to why she's changing her position on this, and she's giving some explanation, and it makes partial sense. There's other environmental impacts of fracking outside of the fact that your oil and natural gas and the carbon dioxide. Of course, what's already well known about the environmental impacts of the oil and gas industry. There's other environmental impacts. There's talks about how it can affect like local tremors and stuff. There's more research to be done on fracking that makes people nervous about the effects it can have on the local community. But the reason why she's turning around on this issue, and it might be genuine as well, it might be paired with genuineness.
I can't respect Hezbollah because I don't have a 3,000-page Wikipedia entry on their opinions of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Thank you for the $10 donation. I don't really understand that message, but I will appreciate the $10 donation. Thank you. Man, that kind of threw me off a little bit, honestly. I didn't expect Buffy the Vampire Slayer to be at the end of that sentence.
clear about where I stand.
Oh, but the reason why is because fracking is gigantic in Pennsylvania, and Democratic election strategy runs straight through the middle of Pennsylvania.
Was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking.
Okay.
Okay, so that was part one.
And now here.
That was part one. I think she did quite well in part one. Now, the fact that this is in parts is actually good. It makes it easier to talk about. I think they did well to cover policy. I think her explanation as to why she changed her opinion didn't just seem like, well, it's for the election, which it would have been a bad answer, even though there's a decent chance that is a big motivating factor. I mean, Pennsylvania, again, runs straight through the middle of Democratic policy to like Democratic plans for victory. I mean, if you look at a campaign map, right, the only way 2024 campaign map, the only way Joe Biden was going to win, right, and this was Joe Biden's plan, was to win, why did I make New York red, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and then win Pennsylvania. And then you get 270 exactly, and then you go off to victory. This was Joe Biden's only strategy to victory. Now, with Kamala Harris in the wings, right? Now, North Carolina is, kind of in the mix. You don't really know for sure. Georgia's in the mix. There was a question about Arizona and Nevada with Biden, but that wasn't really the center of the strategy. That was a lot more uncertain, but it is certainly more in the mix now than it was before. So there's more pathways for victories on the Democratic side, but there's about the same amount of victories on the Republican side as well. The only difference is now the Republicans have to compete in places they didn't have to compete before, even possibly Florida, even though odds are Republicans are going to still win it because Florida is very, very red. So yes, Pennsylvania being having fracking as such a big issue is a big motivating reason as to why I think Republicans are hitting so hard on the issue of fracking, why it's such a big issue now about her previous position on fracking. When she adopted an anti-fracking position in the Democratic primary, that helped her then because she was trying to win a Democratic primary and she didn't want to define herself as a prosecutor or a lot of her legal background because it wasn't useful in that election due to the moment. But now that prosecutorial background is useful, and now this one progressive policy is not useful for the specific Democratic strategy for victory that Dems really, really want. And I mean, I don't want to even say it's what they really, really want to use. It's one of their only ways to victory. It's not their only way to victory, but Pennsylvania is their safest way and easiest way to victory.
As Vice President, you were tasked with addressing the root causes of migration in southern countries and
Northern part of Central America.
the northern part of Central America that affects the southern border of the U.S. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work. But I will say this, that Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support.
When she says it was crafted by some of the most conservative members of the Senate, she's not lying. I mean, James Langford is, you know, he's not from, oh, he's like a California. No, he's from like I think he's from Oklahoma, isn't it? I think he's an Oklahoma senator. One second, let me make sure, so I don't mess up which state it is. Yeah, it's Oklahoma. That's oil country. I believe so. One second. Is it Oklahoma? Yes. Yes, Oklahoma is the oil country. Sorry. I try to know the general economy of most states. I'm trying to understand it better. Oklahoma is oil country. Oklahoma's conservative. Oklahoma is basically as conservative as you can get. And James Langford is one of the most conservative senators you can get. And it was his immigration deal that he negotiated. And to this day, he will admit it shouldn't have been sunk. And it was sunk because Trump didn't want a deal.
She became a prosecutor person.
She became a prosecutor person. Now she's a prosecutor individual running for president. Point is, though, she is not wrong when she says that the most conservative people in the country helped negotiate the bill. In fact, part of the reason why I don't like parts of the bill, that I think it goes so far that it's questionable about what parts of the bill actually are legal under international law. And again, no issue settlement for the Dreamers.
And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border, and because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill. A border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border. And let me tell you something, the Border Patrol endorsed the bill. And I'm sure in large part because they knew they were working around the clock, and 1,500 more agents would help them. That bill would have allowed us to increase seizures of fentanyl. Ask any community in America that has been devastated by fentanyl what passing that bill.
Subscription.
Thank you for the important message. I appreciate it.
Would have done to address their concern and a pain that they've experienced.
So you would push that legislation again. I just want to ask
about... Not only push it, I will make sure that it comes to my desk and I sign it.
No, she better change it. She better change it. She better change. If we have a Senate majority and we have a House majority and she keeps the immigration bill the exact same, when we could introduce some stuff. I mean, I understand, like, is it going to get through a filibuster Senate majority? I don't know. But come on. When you have both majorities, you have the leverage. And you could instead try to push a completely different deal. Just put in the Dreamers in there. Just put the Dreamers in there. Make it a little better on the issues that could be questionable around international law. Then repropose it. Don't put in the same bill if now you have more leverage. You have more leverage. And the difference then and now was they were trying to use Ukraine to jam it through.
PA, even Democrats are pretty pro-fracking. And it can be done well and safely. But not as safe as nuclear power generation.
Thank you so much for the $5. I appreciate this. The thing that gets me is just, though, we did this deal under pressure because of Ukraine aid being used as leverage. Don't, if we have all the leverage, pretend that we're under the same leverage. And, I mean, all I'm saying is a different moment might call for a different deal.
About something that you said in 2019 when you first ran. There was a debate. You raised your hand when asked whether or not the border should be decriminalized. Do you still believe that?
I believe there should be...
Yes, fracking is very popular in Pennsylvania. It employs a lot of people. It makes sense that it's an issue that Kamala is flipping on a bit.
Consequence, we have laws that have to be followed and enforced. that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequence. And let's be clear, in this race, I'm the only person who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations who traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings. I'm the only person in this race who actually served a border state as Attorney General to enforce our laws, and I would enforce our laws as president going forward. I recognize the problem.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of
One of the things that really hurt John Kerry was the idea that he was a flip-flopper, even though he wasn't really as much of a flip-flopper as they suggested he was. But the idea was that he was a flip-flopper, and that did end up undermining his chances in 2004. How much? Who knows? It's hard to exactly calculate, but it is something that they say stuck.
Look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy. Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and, by extension, the globe, around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. So that is the reality of it. In 4 years of being vice president, I'll tell you, one of the aspects to your point is traveling the country extensively. I mean, I'm here in Georgia. I think somebody told me 17 times since I've been vice president in Georgia alone. I believe it is important to build consensus, and it is important to find a common place of understanding of where we can actually solve problems.
On that note, you had a lot of Republican speakers at the convention.
Yeah.
Will you appoint a Republican to your cabinet?
Yes, I would.
Anyone
Yes,
in mind?
I would. No one in particular in mind. We got 68 days to go with this election, so I'm not
68? Is it really?
I would. I think.
I keep saying under 70, and I thought that 68 days? No, it's 67. My goodness.
I think it's really important. I have spent my career inviting diversity of opinion. I think it's important to have people at the table when some of the most important decisions are being made that have different views, different experiences. And I think it would be to the benefit of the American public to have a member of my cabinet who was a Republican.
I want to ask you about your...
Honestly speaking, I think this is going well. I mean, she had to explain that some way, explaining it from a position of experience instead of a position of, the American people aren't just there, so it doesn't look like she's flip-flopping. She did the best that she could. I think that most of this is coming off very naturally. I don't want to say the belly laughing is bad, because I have no problem with it, but this has been a very serious interview. This has been a very straightforward interview, and maybe not a lot of people have seen her in this capacity. I mean, this is her first interview in this capacity as nominee, so that makes sense. But I think it's all going pretty fine. I mean, the main thing I was worried about was she gets cornered on something, and she just gets grilled, and she doesn't know what to do, and shuts down under the pressure, because I'm not saying that because, that's necessarily happened before that she shut down, but running for president of the United States, you have the entire world's eyes on you. it's a big microscope to be under, and it is a lot of pressure to be under. And so far she's doing pretty well considering the pressure in the moment.
Your opponent, Donald Trump.
Okay.
I was a little bit surprised. People might be surprised to hear that you have never interacted with him, met him face to face. That's going to change soon. But what I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes, questioning a core part of your identity.
Yeah.
Any?
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
How do you guys feel about this? I mean, she could have spent like an hour, not an hour, but like a minute, 2 minutes, just going on and on and on about how important it is for her identity as a black woman. And she could have said like, this is just how down and dirty and disgusting he is, and he doesn't have the dignity to be president, yada, yada, yada. I like this. I think this is good because the message of what he said gets out there. She seems generally unbothered. I think that makes her come off as stable and professional. I think that makes her come off as somebody who can deal with the pressure, who can deal with the public pressure, and somebody who seems, I mean, she seems frankly unbothered, at least in the eyes of the public. I don't know what she's like in private, but she seems unbothered. And I think that's a good look for her. And I think that the strategy is from the Kamala campaign, from what I've heard, a lot of it is Trump's actions speak for themselves instead of just doubling the speak. Like, if he says something crazy, instead of just going on and on and on about it, you got to offer a positive message. Just let Trump's actions and crazy words speak for themselves. Don't go on about it. I think to some extent you have to hit it, but you need to hit it like quickly. Like 1, 2, 3, move on, policy. There's no need to get out there and gripe about him being crazy. Everyone already knows that he's a mean prick. You don't need to gripe about him being a mean prick. You need to gripe about how he's not going to be a good president, and he's a bit of a mean prick, but his policies are a disastrous idea. A 10% tariff is going to mean extremely increased prices for American consumers, and that's not even talking about the 50% tariff on Chinese imports. That's the type of stuff that she should be talking about. Because currently, Americans are polling actually pretty well good on the issue of a 10% tariff on everything. And I don't think they really realize exactly what that would mean, especially for the goods and services that we don't have domestic replacements for.
Okay, let's talk about some foreign policy issues that would be on your plate if you become commander-in-chief. President Biden has tried unsuccessfully to end the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. He's been doing it for months and months, along with you. Would you do anything differently? For example, would you withhold some U.S. weapons shipments to Israel? That's what a lot of people on the progressive left want you to do.
Let me be very clear. I'm unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself. And that's not going to change. But let's take a step back. October 7, 1,200 people were massacred. Many young people who were simply attending a music festival. Women were horribly raped. As I said then, I say today, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. And we have got to get a deal done. We were in Doha. Mm-hmm. We have to get a deal done. This war must end.
In the meantime,
and we must get a deal that is about getting the hostages out. I've met with the families of the American hostages. Let's get the hostages out. Let's get the ceasefire done.
But no change in policy in terms of arms and so forth.
No, we have to get a deal done. Dana, we have to get a deal done. When you look at the significance of this to the families, to the people who are living in that region, a deal is not only the right thing to do to end this war, but will unlock so much of what must happen next. I remain committed since I've been on October 8 to what we must do to work toward a two-state solution, where Israel is secure And in equal measure, the Palestinians have security and self-determination and dignity.
It's the same position that the Democratic Party and most American presidents have had for, you know, as long as I've been alive. And as long as my mother has been alive and my father has been alive. Just about at this point. So this is not really surprising to me. I saw some people were surprised online. Again, it shouldn't have been surprising at all. And there's a bunch of reasons. We've talked about this entire time about risk. And when we talk about the threat of the Middle East spiraling into a theater of conflict and not just, parts of southern Lebanon, which there's still the threat of an Israeli invasion into southern Lebanon and Gaza. There's the threat of war spilling out into other parts of the region. And that is an element of risk that the Biden administration is actively trying to prevent. And she is part of that effort. She is part of the Biden administration trying to prevent that spill out. There's an element of risk there. There's an element of risk in the idea of the war spilling over. And if it does spill over and it does spiral out and they abandon American policy and this war spirals out after that, what the rest of the campaign is going to be is whether it was the case or not. Let's say the Biden administration tomorrow announces no weapons to Israel, and then a war happens the next day, a week after the next, or some point after. Whether or not it would be the case that the United States sending weapons to Israel is going to be the reason that war spills out, I don't think so, because I think that's silly. Electorally, that's what the rest of the campaign would be. The rest of the campaign would be Donald Trump saying, oh my God, the Biden administration let the Russians invade Ukraine. Then October 7th happened. Then the Middle East spiraled out into a wider war. Right after the Biden administration tries to pull back support, their decisions are leading to this. It was them pulling out support from Israel that allowed the reason to spiral out into chaos and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think for one reason, I think that there's just a general risk in breaking with decades-long American policy. Even though, and I shit you not, Ronald Reagan was withholding aircraft to Israel during the invasion of southern Lebanon. So the idea of let's say the Israelis do invade southern Lebanon and then Joe Biden responded by we're not going to send you X, Y, and Z, or we're not doing, that wouldn't even be that unprecedented. But because of the standards around rhetoric and how our politics around Israel has developed since the 80s, it's no longer the standard. And so there's a political risk element there. There's also the issue of, to be quite frank, Israel still does have, if you were to ask people, do you support Israel or do you support Palestine? More people in the United States say Israel. Now, most people do not fall solely in the camp of Israel or Palestine, but that's how it rolls with the American electorate. Most people want the war to be over, but that's also how it rolls with the American electorate. And it's not just that. We're not even talking about the power of different lobbies. We're not talking about the Jewish community's deep relationship with the Democratic Party. I'm not saying that's a negative thing. I'm just saying it's an obvious thing. It's an obvious thing from the polling data when you see who Jewish people tend to vote for. And so I think the Democratic Party is nervous. We're just talking about the electoral reasons to be nervous to break with policy, let alone take an aggressive stance towards Israel. So this isn't surprising to me whatsoever. I think that we should leverage aid against Israel for the recognition of a future Palestinian state. That's my position. I know not everyone agrees with it. That's perfectly fine. That is not the position of Kamala Harris. That's not particularly surprising. She won on a Biden-Harris ticket. She didn't win originally on a Harris-Biden ticket, and she never ran on an anti-sending aid to Israel ticket. And so when she looks at that polling data, when she looks at the amount of political risk that led her to this point, when she looks at the risk of war spiraling out in the region if they make a policy, not because they make a policy change, but if they make a policy change and then war spirals out in the region. You know how Trump says, oh, it was Biden being president that caused the invasion of Ukraine because he was so weak? It probably wasn't. I'm going to be honest with you. My opinion is it almost certainly wasn't just Biden being weak and it was because he was president. But that's the argument that's going to be made. And so I think that this close to the election, the last thing they want to do right now is rock the boat terribly. It's the same reason why, on top of the strategic and humanitarian implications of the war spiraling out in the region, why I don't think they want to rock the boat too much. This isn't a defense, it's an explanation. My job isn't to defend Kamala Harris. I'm more trying to explain the type of logic that would lead her, even though people might be nervous about losing the energy amongst the youth energy, losing the energy amongst the youth is of course at risk. They probably are more interested in trying to concentrate on the demographics that turn up and vote more often and reliably at the voting booths, which are going to be older Americans and people over the age of 35. Which, while there are people who support Palestine in that age group, there is also, of course, like a lot of the base rejection that you've seen in the protest movement comes from youth, come from campus movements, which is an important part of the Democratic Party, but it's also one of the least reliable voting blocks of the Democratic Party. And so there is a fear within the Democratic Party that while even if they have sympathies, and this is something that's been expressed to me, that listening to the loudest voices in the room, which is at times the youth, is going to lead them going down the primrose path to electoral destruction because they wanted to listen to a small righteous minority instead of where the majority of Americans are at a time of extreme political risk. That is where the logic is. I'm not putting any moral justification on it. Again, I've already made my position clear. But that's at least what I'm seeing happening in this interaction, if you guys are interested in my position. I mean, not my position, but what my insight, if there's insight to me just speculating wildly. I gotta label what's speculation. You gotta be honest. You can't just say you know everything.
As CEO of Cashback,
oh my God!
help people.
I can't believe they're putting him in the cabinet too. Wow, impressive. He'd make a good press secretary.
The country is just starting to get to know you. I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons.
Oh, no, not
in war,
this.
but you have never deployed actually in a war zone.
Ghost of Nestor Machno has donated $5. The Knesset voted against a two-state solution and ensured its impossibility. Dems are naive for thinking Israel will ever play ball, let alone Bibi.
Thank you for the $5. You'd be surprised at what people will do in order to secure what they want. What a lot of people do want is peace. And when you polled people about the idea of a two-state solution with a disarmed Palestinian state, which was the Saudi proposal, Israelis reflected on it with a lot more, at least, consideration in the polling data than many would have you believe. But it's that disarmed element that, of course, is going to be contentious with organizations like Hamas. And, of course, like there is a certain loss of leverage when you do disarm that is inherent in any type of negotiation.
War, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak, as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack.
His excuses, there was a lot around that, but there was the moment. He was saying that what he meant was that he carried a weapon of war, not that he was in a war and that the grammar was wrong. I mean, honestly, like, people say he's engaged in stolen valor. He was a veteran of 24 years in the National Guard. you can retire after 20 years. He retired whenever he wanted to. I don't think he ever went out and like bragged about like I was in Iraq and I think people are really trying to lower the standard of stolen valor, and if they keep doing it, it's gonna be like a boy cried wolf situation when somebody actually starts doing stolen valor. Like if I started going around like, yeah, I was basically in the Ukrainian army. A camera's kind of like a rifle. Like if you don't want to wear this word down because, you know, we want to take this seriously. Like stolen valor is like a serious offense. And when we're talking about people who served 24 years in the nation's military being accused of stolen valor by fellow veteran J.D. Vance, I think that's really whittling down the word. And I think it's not good to have when you have, no matter which president wins, there's going to be a veteran in the administration. That should be something where the veteran community is like, oh, that's great. And instead, we've got veterans on the national stage, neither of which participated in stolen valor, with one getting accused of stolen valor, even though the one served 24 years, Vance served a lot less time. Like, I mean, come on.
Back on my dog. I'm not going to do that. And the one thing I'll never do is I'll never demean another member's service in any way. I never have, and I never will.
I just one other question, because again, this is all new.
Yeah.
I mean, this was not, however many days ago, this was not on either of your bingo cards, especially yours. You had to clarify that you had said that you and your wife used IVF, but it turned out you used a different kind of fertility in order to have children. And then when you ran for Congress in 2006, your campaign repeatedly made false statements about a 1995 arrest for drunk and reckless driving. What do you say to voters who aren't sure whether they can take you at your word?
Well, I've been very public. I think they can see my students come out, former folks I've served with, and they vouch for me. I certainly own my mistakes when I make them. The one thing I'll tell you is I wished in this country wouldn't have to do this. I spoke about our infertility issues because it's hell, and families know this. And I spoke about the treatments that were available to us that had those beautiful children there. That's quite a contrast in folks that are trying to take those rights away from us. And so I think people know who I am. They know that record. They've seen.
I mean, like, could you imagine like the scandals on the Democratic, like Tim Walz said he was doing IVF like treatments when really he was doing IUI. Liar, Walz. And then you go watch like Donald Trump on the debate stage and he's like throwing out real lies like every 1 minute and 30 seconds. And what was the recent thing he said? He said 100% of new jobs have gone to illegal immigrants. Actually, no, more than 100%. Scientists have discovered a number above 100%. That number has gone to illegal immigrants. You think I'm lying? That's a real quote. I don't know if you guys have seen it on stream or if I've shown it on stream before. I think I've shown it on stream before, but I'll find it again. Trump above 100%. If I can find this quote. Trump above 100% jobs. Here we go. This is from C-SPAN. If you question my source, I looked to make sure we had C-SPAN.
Of the net month, that's in July. Virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone to migrants. You know that? Most of the job creation has gone to migrants. In fact, I've heard that substantially more than beyond the number of 100%. It's a much higher number than that, but the government hasn't caught up with that yet. But virtually right now, as of the time they did this, virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone
above 100%. They found a number above. Scientists discovered a number above 100% increase.
In that, I've taught thousands of students.
How do you 100%? Like crazy, incredible. It really is incredible.
I've been out there, and I won't apologize for speaking passionately, whether it's guns in schools or protecting of reproductive rights. The contrast could not be clearer between what we're running against. The vice president's position on this has been clear, and I think most Americans get it if you've been through that. I don't think they're cutting hairs on IVF or IUI. I think what they're cutting hairs on is an abortion ban and the ability to be able to deny families the chance to have a beautiful child.
Vice President Harris, you were a very staunch defender of President Biden's
was a
capacity
good
to
answer.
serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given
Of
where
course. Well, number one, if he ended up being the nominee, she couldn't have fallen out of line. That would have been used endlessly against the campaign. Number two, if she wants to be the nominee and she wants to be the next president country be picked, she can't undercut Biden, or she's definitely not going to be picked. And then they're going to have a possible, I don't know, like, they're just going to swing it and throw it to somebody else who didn't get any votes during the Democratic primary. That's a huge risky maneuver. So I don't know. It makes sense for her to be loyal to the president of the United States.
we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly. He cares so deeply about the American people. He is so smart and loyal to the American people. And I have spent hours upon hours with him, be it in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. He has the intelligence, the commitment, and the judgment and disposition that I think the American people rightly deserve in their president. By contrast, the former president has none of that. And so, one, I am so proud to have served as vice president to Joe Biden. And two, I am so proud to be running with Tim Walz for president of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been.
Forward is such a stereotypical well, what's our politics slogan? What are we, as the progressive candidate, what are we saying? Well, what's going to be our slogan? Oh, I don't know. Oh, we really need something to shake up this campaign. How about we go forward? Ah, yes, as in progress. Truly, we are progressives. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just it's a little on the nose, but I guess, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Simple is sometimes easy.
Contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
But the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss.
Who do you think they tested? What focus groups do you think they tested that with? It's a good line. It's obviously something she was in the shower okay, and then he's gonna be like, and then I'm gonna be like, yeah, how about instead of beating people down, you lift people up, and everyone's gonna snap. And it's gonna be great. Let me hear it again. I gotta snap. I didn't snap.
Warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss in this election.
Because we haven't had a chance to talk, I'm just curious, staying on President Biden, when he called you and said he was pulling out of the race, what was that like? And did he offer to endorse you right away, or did you ask for it?
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces, and we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, are you sure? And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
And what about the endorsement? Did you ask for it?
You know how funny it would have been? You know how funny it would have been if she said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "You know what? Good point, Kamala. You're exactly the pick-me-up I needed to get back out there. You're right. I can do it. I can. Scranton Joe is never going out. Scranton Joe is always the comeback kid. Let's give it to him. We're gonna rock 'em, sock 'em, robots, Kamala." And then he just boom right back out there. Oh my gosh. What a turn of events.
He was very clear that he was going to support me.
So when he called to tell you, he said, "I'm pulling out of the race and I'm going to support you."
Well, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest. I think history is going to show a number of things about Joe Biden's presidency. I think history is going to show that in so many ways it was transformative, be it on what we have accomplished.
Look, I'm sorry. Like, maybe I have grown. Look, there's a lot of things I disagree with Joe on, including foreign policy things. But this is something I have to respect him on because, like, and maybe I'm giving him too much respect, but let me give you my perspective. I watched the Turkish opposition have come with this close with being able to knock down Erdogan. This close. They were so close. And then they ran that same dude, Kishkarogu. I'm sorry, I can never pronounce his name correctly. But the dude who already ran against him time and time again and lost and didn't have a chance. But he was the person, and not that he didn't have a chance this time, but he kept losing again. And of all the options that they could have ran with, he was the least likely to win. But he would not give up the position, and so he's who they ran with, and he lost. And it was a close race, but he lost. And it makes me think, like, if it was somebody else, could Erdogan have actually lost that election? If it was somebody more popular? Yeah, Kishlikdoroğlu. It's very hard. It's Turks, am I right? Beautiful. Point is, though, I think about that scenario playing out in the United States, and it would have been easier for Joe because he already had the delegates. So the decision-making power was in his capacity, even if he knew that they would have to do it a lot more on their own, and he would have to run the race hard, and he'd have to be on the trail. He could have tried, and he didn't, and he passed it over, and I do appreciate it.
Finally investing in America's infrastructure, investing in new economies, in new industries, what we have done to bring our allies back together and have confidence in who we are as America and grow that alliance, what we have done to stand true to our principles, including one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I think history is going to show not only has Joe Biden led an administration that has achieved those extraordinary successes, but the character of the man is one that he has been in his life and career, including as a president, quite selfless and puts the American people first.
I just have to ask you both about two standout moments, aside, of course, from the addresses that you both gave, but standout moments that were perhaps unexpected during the convention. You mentioned one of them, Governor. A moment that you shared, that the world shared with your son, Gus. You were speaking.
Oh, please don't ask him about the attacks on his son. He doesn't need to be asked about what Ann Coulter said or about what that... oh, my God. He doesn't need to know. Nobody cares what Cat Turd said on Twitter.
You both about two
I don't want to know.
standout
I don't want him to
moments,
be asked
aside,
that.
of course, from the addresses that you both gave, but standout moments that were perhaps unexpected during the convention. You mentioned one of them, Governor. A moment that you shared, that the world shared with your son, Gus. You were speaking, the camera caught him, so incredibly proud of you, so emotional, saying, "That's my dad."
Yeah, I don't know as a father I could have
Oh,
ever
thank
imagined
God
that.
they didn't ask about it.
Grateful for so many reasons to be on this ticket, but that moment, to understand what was really important, to have my son feel a sense of pride in me, that I was trying to do the right thing. And it was, you try and protect your kids, it brings notoriety and things, but it was just such a visceral, emotional moment that I'm grateful I got to experience it, and I'm so proud of him. I'm proud of him. I'm proud of Hope. I'm proud of Gwen. She's a wonderful mother, and these are great kids. And I think the one thing is, talking about the era we're in, is our politics can be better. It can be different. We can show some of these things, and we can have families involved in this. And I hope that there was I hope people felt that out there, and I hope they hug their kids a little tighter, because you just never know, and life can be kind of hard.
And last question, Madam Vice President, the photograph that has gone viral. You were speaking, one of your grandnieces that you were just talking
Yes.
about was watching you accept the nomination. You didn't explicitly talk about gender or race in your speech, but it obviously means a lot to a lot of people, and that viral picture really says it. What does it mean to you?
I am running because I believe that I am the best person to do this job at this moment, for all Americans, regardless of race and gender.
Good answer.
But I did see that photograph, and I was deeply touched by it. And you're right, it's the back of her head, her two little braids, and then I'm in the front of the photograph, obviously speaking. And
Sorry.
it's very humbling.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's what they meant by didn't speak well. I mean, that's like the one little fumble.
Oh, she had a lot to talk about. She had a lot. She listened to everything, and she listens to everything.
Give you your hot takes?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Madam Vice President, Governor Walz, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank
Is
you.
that really the whole interview? Is it really just half an hour? Just about? I thought it was longer. Is that really the whole interview? Are they gonna release more in the future, or is this really the whole thing? Huh. Well, asking her about her positions changing on fracking, I think, was a good question. It was a question that needed to be asked. Outside of that, I think the economic question was okay. I think it could have been better framed by Dana. I think when they were going to go into foreign policy, what they should have just said is, I guess, let's talk about Israel. If you don't say if we're going to talk about foreign policy, talk about maybe one or two more issues than that, Don't, if I'm going to be like, hey, I'm going to host a foreign policy panel, and then my panel topics are, we're going to talk about the Battle of Bakhmut, we're going to talk about the Battle of Chasiv Yar, and we're going to talk about the Battle of Voldar, okay? And then, wait. I thought it was foreign policy. No, these are technically foreign policy. You could ask a few more questions, but maybe that's me being biased, as Dylan Burns, the person who's focused on foreign policy, and this is the issue that I care about. I also am really eager to hear Kamala Harris answer some question about Ukraine, because, the only indication I've gotten was that one statement at the DNC where she said she'll support Ukraine, but I've heard nothing about long-range strikes. I've heard nothing about what aid packages would look like under a Kamala Harris administration. I've heard nothing of a similar capacity from Tim Walz, which, even though he's been pro-Ukraine as governor, there's only so much you can do as governor. And so I don't know if she's going to be any different than Joe Biden, if she's going to be any more bolder than Joe Biden, less hesitant on Joe Biden, if she's going to do anything different, if she's going to, if she's going to fight for the aid, if she's going to make long-term aid mechanisms so that the Russians think, okay, we have to sit down and negotiate because this is just going to grind on and we can't afford that. What is she going to do on it? I have no clue. All I can do is look at the people around her who I know advise her and whisper in the ear, and Philip Gordon, her national security advisor as vice president, and I know he's strong on the Russians on Syria, but I don't know how much is going to transition into changes on policy in Ukraine. I don't know how much it's going to change. There might be after the election, they might be able to think a little bit more about Ukraine aid, but is it going to be more than the previous aid packages? I don't know. I have no indication. I have nothing to go off of besides the fact that she said she's pro-Ukraine. So right now, I'm just imagining she's vaguely Joe Biden arena-ish. She's going to be somewhere in the Joe Biden arena. I doubt she's going to be more. The one thing I'll say is I doubt given Joe Biden's length of experience and expertise in foreign policy, which I think has led to a certain amount of hesitancy that might be slightly overbearing, if not appreciated. I think maybe not coming from that circle and having Philip Gordon in her corner might make her be a little bit more aggressive, but I'm at least standing on the position that I don't think she's going to be any weaker on the issue. But right now it's just pure speculation until we get any answer on it. Dylan almost called Tim Walz Tim Pool. You're right. I did almost call Tim Walz Tim Pool. An embarrassing mistake for sure. I think we're talking about the $6,000 first time child, it's not first time child, every child, first year for a child tax credit I think was good. I think talking about the continuation of the child tax credit was good. I think the $25,000 down payment was good. I think that, maybe talking a little bit more about housing construction and how they're going to go about that so people can get an idea of the mechanism in their mind, because just hearing you're going to build houses on one thing, giving at least a 1-2 simple instruction guide and we're going to funnel the money here and then here. It doesn't need to be too complicated. It could just be, we want to give money to states to allow them to invest, or, through this new federal department, something along those lines. But I understand that they're busy. They're on the campaign trail. It's kind of hard to maybe make the overarching structure plans right now. And they're just kind of aiming for things that they can generally guide towards or generally aim towards to make promises towards. But still, I think that maybe a little bit more detail on the policy, even though, of course, I said they couldn't go that deep into it. I think the stuff that they did talk about, though, was good. I think that was good. I think she answered the flip-flopping question good. As for the Israel-Palestine answer, it's what I would have expected. I already give my opinions there. I'm as numb about it as I was before. More important topic. Thoughts on Rings of Power? I expect some sort of opinion from a Catholic. Am I a Catholic? I doubt anyone would agree with me, but channels like Dylan's and other mature channels are replacing corporate news. Am I a mature channel? I don't think I'm a mature channel. I don't think I'm very mature at all.